They called it a transition meeting. At 9:02 a.m. sharp, a man half my age, in a suit worth more than my truck, slid a pale blue folder across the polished desk, like it was just another Monday. The fluorescent light buzzed faintly above us. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and cold ambition. "Mr. Harland," he said, not looking up, "I won't sugarcoat this. The board has decided to move in a different direction, effective immediately. Your role at Norcrest Industrial is no longer required." I looked at the folder. The standard corporate issue, HR letterhead, typed severance package, waiver of rights. I'd seen enough of these land on other people's desks to know what was inside, but I never expected to see my name on the front dot. No warning, no discussion, just, "A folder you have until Friday to sign," he added, glancing briefly at his Apple Watch. "We've included a fair package. And of course, legal counsel is welcome if you'd like a review." I nodded slowly. "Who made the decision?" "The executive team," he replied quickly. "Performance audit, efficiency reviews, realignment, corporate speak, hollow and polished. Scripted words from someone who had never changed a forklift, tire in the dark during an ice storm, or fixed a jammed conveyor with a wrench and borrowed elbow grease. My name is Arthur Harland. I'm 61 years old. I've worked at Norcrest Industrial for 29 years, 10 months, and 17 days. In exactly 13 days, I would have hit my 30-year mark, unlocking a contractual $102,000 loyalty and retirement bonus written into my employee agreement back when the company still cared about things like trust, but they didn't want to pay that bonus, and they thought I wouldn't notice. "Thank you," I said, rising. He blinked. For making it clear," I said. "Good luck with your realignment." He extended his hand. I didn't take it. I walked through the plant one last time. The familiar sound of machinery whirring in rhythm, compressed air valves, hissing like breathing lungs. For 3 decades, this place was part of my pulse. I knew every steel beam, every overhead sensor, every shortcut through the maintenance tunnels. The newer folks called me Old Iron, not because I complained, but because I never cracked. But now, I was being quietly disposed of. I passed the break room. My coffee mug, black ceramic, chipped handle, still sat beside the sink. A gift from my wife on our 25th anniversary. "One more bolt," it read. She always had a dry sense of humor. Beside my locker sat a picture of her from 2012, taken on Norcrest Family Day. She'd passed away in 19. Cancer doesn't care how many years you've given a company. It felt wrong to put her in the cardboard box, but I did. "Mr. Harland," it was Marcus, one of the younger engineers I'd mentored during the automation rollout. "You don't have to go through with this," he said quietly, nervously glancing over his shoulder. "Everyone knows they're trying to cut around the pension obligations. You're not the only one they've done this to." I just nodded. "They've got lawyers, Marcus, so do you," he said. "Your nephew, right, in Dayton?" I paused. "Had I mentioned that?" Marcus shrugged. "You told me once when I messed up that voltage reading and thought I was going to be fired, that it'd been 3 years ago." He remembered. So did I. Back home, I placed the box on my kitchen table. The rain tapped on the windows, not dramatic, just steady, familiar. I made tea, poured it into my chipped mug, opened the folder. 6-week severance, 3 months of health insurance, non-compete clause for 18 months. I laughed, not loud, just one of those silent exhales that turns into something dry. They wanted me silent, compliant, and gone before the 30-year mark. No retirement party, no golden plaque, just erased. I picked up my phone. I had ignored my nephew's offer before. Evan, labor law, tough as nails, but with a patient voice. He'd told me last Christmas, Uncle Art, "You ever need help with anything shady at work, call me before you sign a single thing." That had felt paranoid then. Now it felt prophetic. I dialed. "Hey Evan, it's Uncle Art." There was a pause on the line. "Tell me everything," he said. I told him about the folder, the timing, the bonus, the silence, the smirk on that executive's face. "You kept your original contract, right?" he asked. "In a drawer, printed, and signed, along with the last 3 policy updates I helped write." "Even better," Evan said. "There's a federal clause in ERISA if your company has an active retirement plan and they fire you to avoid paying your vested benefit. That's retaliatory discharge, illegal. Do I have a case? Maybe, but I'll need to see everything." I stood up, walked into the hallway, and opened my filing cabinet. 30 years of documentation, memos, rewrites, payroll printouts, meeting notes, handwritten addendums. I hadn't thrown away anything since the 90s. I scanned until midnight, sent him everything the next morning. My inbox pinged at 7:12 a.m. from Evan. "Don't sign anything. I found something they probably forgot existed. Call me when I called." He was already caffeinated and surgical. "Clause 6B of your original contract," he said, "combined with the 2008 HR policy memo you signed as training lead, includes what's called a proximity lock. Any employee within 15 days of a pension or milestone payout cannot be terminated without documented just cause. You're at 13 days. I sat down slowly. "They broke their own rules," I said. "Yes," Evan replied. "And if we're right, they've done it to others too." That morning something shifted, not in the sky, not in my bones, in my intent. I'd spent a lifetime choosing to be useful rather than loud, but now silence had become permission, and I wasn't going to offer it anymore. Evan called again just after 10. I've started background checks on Norkerist's recent employee terminations, he said. Using publicly filed data, there's a noticeable bump in strategic exits just before major pension thresholds. Too many to be coincidence. He paused, then added, they thought they were being clever. But HR documents always leave trails. He asked if I knew any of the others. I did that. Angela Kim, 59 years old, terminated 5 days before her early retirement credit matured. Ben Holloway, 62, let go due to restructuring 3 weeks shy of his legacy pension adjustment. Margaret Dalton, operations lead, 28 years in, dismissed with no farewell and no explanation. She'd left quietly, but she'd looked broken the last time I saw her in the parking lot. Watching her keycard fail to beep. Evan asked if I could reach out to them. He needed corroboration, witnesses, patterns, so I started making calls. Angela answered on the second ring. Her voice was soft, a little tired. Arthur, is everything okay? Not really, I said, but maybe it could be. By evening, I had 4 people willing to talk. All of them told the same story. No performance issues, no complaints, no write-ups, just meetings, envelopes, and decisions already made. Each of them had been within weeks of a substantial payout. None had challenged it, not because they believed it was right, but because they thought no one would care. Angela said something I couldn't forget. They didn't fire us for doing a bad job. They fired us because they thought we'd be too tired to fight. Evan built a file. He printed timelines, mapped terminations to milestones, cited ERISA statutes and company policy contradictions. He wrote up a 12-page memo that laid out a *** potential case of patent-based pension evasion ***. He called it a constructive paper trail. He was careful not to use the word lawsuit. Not yet, but by Thursday he was ready for the next step. You're going to submit a formal request for reconsideration of your termination, he said. Not because it'll get you reinstated, it won't, but because it triggers HR's obligation to review cause-based terminations under their own policy. And when they fail to produce cause, then we trigger phase 2. I sent the letter that evening, brief, polite, just procedural. Dear Norkerist HR. I am requesting a formal review of the basis for my termination, specifically in light of Clause 6b and the proximity to my 30-year pension milestone. I believe my dismissal may constitute a breach of contractual obligation. Sincerely. Arthur Harland. I expected silence. I received a meeting invite within 18 hours. The HR director, Myra Colton, looked genuinely uncomfortable as we sat across from each other in a small windowless room. She had a folder in front of her, but she never opened it. Arthur, she said quietly, I just want to say I'm sorry about how this was handled. Handled, not done, not decided. That word was deliberate. I'd like to understand what this refers to, I replied calmly. She nodded. We've reviewed your file and your concerns. I've also reviewed your original employment agreement. You're correct. There's a proximity clause, and the executive team overstepped. There was no documented cause for your termination. It was treated as a redundancy. But that doesn't override contractual protections. So you're saying it was wrongful? I'm saying, she said, glancing toward the one-way mirror behind her, you should expect a revised offer shortly. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was worried, because I was planning. This wasn't just about me anymore. Not just about the $102,000. This was about the way a system quietly punished people who didn't make noise, who gave decades without demanding fanfare. That I wanted more than my name off a spreadsheet. I wanted the practice stopped. The revised severance arrived via courier. It was slick, generous by corporate standards. For months, severance, full health benefits, a non-disclosure clause, and no mention of the retirement milestone or pension gap. I sent it back unsigned. Evan smiled. When I told him, good, he said, because tomorrow morning we're sending them something better. The official complaint to the Department of Labor was filed on a Friday at 8:46 a.m. It outlined multiple potential violations: age-based termination, patterns, breach of proximity protections, and selective restructuring focused on legacy earners, all backed by signed declarations, timeline exhibits, and anonymized severance documents at 10:02. Evan received a call from Norkerist's legal counsel requesting a confidential meeting at 10:07. He said, now we're in phase 2. The meeting took place at an off-site neutral location, a quiet conference center outside of Dayton. They brought in 3 attorneys. Evan brought a folder. I just listened. Their lead attorney, a woman named Reese Calder, had a voice like cooled steel. We'd like to resolve this quickly, she began. So would we, Evan replied, but not quietly. Calder blinked. Excuse me. Evan opened the folder, laid out the retirement clause, the comparative employee timelines, the internal HR memos. Then, without speaking, he slid a page forward. It was a transcript of an internal Slack message between two managers joking about retirement math and cleaning the roster before bonuses hit. It was dated 2 months ago. Calder went pale. "We're prepared to discuss a broad settlement," she said after a long silence. Back in my truck, I sat for a while, not out of exhaustion but out of something deeper. Satisfaction maybe, but mostly clarity. They didn't fire me because I was useless. They fired me because I knew too much, had seen too much, and worst of all, had the records to prove it. But quiet doesn't mean defeated, and dignity is not the same as obedience. The following week unfolded like a slow unraveling. Not dramatic, not loud, just thread by thread. The company began to show its seams. First, it was an internal audit notice, a quiet HR memo posted discreetly on Norcrest's intranet, ongoing review of legacy employee offboarding procedures. Then came the whispers, emails that stopped mid-thread, meetings that got rescheduled, then disappeared entirely. Executives who'd once strutted through the floor now moved like ghosts. I didn't go back to the plant. I didn't need to. Others began to come to me. Ben Holloway called on Tuesday. His voice cracked from the very first word. "Arthur." They called me Norcrest. Yes, Mira Colton herself said there had been a clerical error in my severance calculation and that they wanted to issue a correction. Full retroactive pension, back pay, an apology letter. He paused, and then quietly added, Did you do that?" "No, Ben, we did that." Angela Kim emailed later that night. Attached was a scan of her revised compensation agreement, 2 pages longer, 3 clauses lighter. Non-compete clause gone. Silence clause removed. Bonus restored. Bonus restored. In her message she wrote only one sentence. "Greater than for the first time in 6 months. I slept through the night." Evan stayed 2 steps ahead. Each time Norcrest made a move, he countered not with threats, but with precision. He kept track of every revised settlement, every acknowledgement of error, every unsigned NDA they slipped in, hoping someone wouldn't notice. We built a file. By Friday, we had 9 employees with matching stories. Dismissed just before a benefit threshold. Offered hush money disguised as generosity. Told to let it go because they were too old, too tired, or too far gone to fight. But they weren't. They were waking up on Sunday morning. Evan and I met with Margaret Dalton at a diner just off Route 42. She'd lost her job quietly the year before. No lawyer, no complaint, just a box of belongings and a feeling of failure she couldn't shake. Her gray hair was tied back in a careful bun. Her hands shook slightly as she sipped her tea. "I used to believe in that place," she said softly. "I helped build their vendor compliance system. Trained 5 department heads. They told me I was non-essential." "You still have your paperwork?" Evan asked gently. She nodded. "Then let's fix this." On Monday, Norcrest made their next move. They announced that Elijah Wren, executive who had signed most of the controversial termination letters, had stepped away to pursue personal interests. No farewell email, no press release. Just gone. And then Myra Colton, the HR director, reached out directly. "Arthur," she said, her voice lower than before, "there's going to be a meeting. The board wants to speak with you. Not legal, not formal, just a conversation." I didn't answer right away. Evan did. "Terms, they'll fly him to the regional headquarters, cover all travel. No recording, no contracts, just dialogue." "Okay," Evan said, "but I'm going with him." We arrived at Norcrest headquarters, a sleek glass and metal fortress, built after the 3rd expansion. I'd never seen the inside before. Most of the floor-level workers hadn't. The boardroom was enormous. 12 seats, 10 filled. At the center sat Reginald Dawson, the chairman of the board, clean-shaven, immaculate posture, polished like a museum artifact. He didn't offer pleasantries. "Mr. Harland," he said, folding his hands, "you've made quite the stir." Evan smiled faintly. "We prefer to call it a correction." Dawson nodded. "Some of our younger executives made decisions without understanding the full structure of our legacy agreements. That's unfortunate. It's also illegal." Evan replied. A pause. Then Dawson took a breath. "We'd like to make things right, quietly if possible, and permanently." The proposal was unexpected. Not just my pension, not just the $102,000 they offered. Restored retirement benefits for all affected employees. Formal acknowledgement of policy breach, documented and signed. Resignation of 2 executives, Wren and 1 unnamed. New safeguards. Any future termination within 60 days of a retirement milestone must be reviewed by a neutral third party. And finally, a policy amendment, to be named after me. I blinked. "The Harland clause," Dawson said. "It'll be attached to all senior employment agreements and embedded in our onboarding protocols. We believe legacy deserves protection. You've reminded us of that." I said nothing for a long moment, then I nodded. Back in the truck, Evan exhaled like he'd been holding it all week. "We just changed the law at Norcrest," he said. "No," I replied. We reminded them it already existed. By Wednesday it was done. Angela, Ben, Margaret, and the others received official letters, full compensation, no conditions, no gag orders. The emails poured in, messages of thanks, some of disbelief. One simply said, "Greater than you gave us our dignity back." I went back to Norcarist once, 2 weeks later, not as an employee, not to collect anything, just to walk the floor. The younger workers shook my hand. Some didn't even know my name until that day, but they knew what had happened. Word spreads. Even when management tries to contain it. Marcus found me near Dock 4. "They're afraid of you now," he said with a smirk. "No," I replied. "They're just remembering I was never the weak one." He nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Harland. We're safer now because of you." I returned home that evening to a stack of mail. Most of it junk. But in the middle was a plain white envelope. From Norcrest. Inside, a letter. At the top, Employee Protection Addendum, Harland clause. At the bottom, Reginald Dawson's signature and mine. There's a strange kind of quiet that settles once the storm passes. It doesn't feel like peace. At first it feels like disbelief. For weeks I'd woken up with a singular purpose: fight back now. I woke up to birds outside my window, the hum of the old refrigerator, and the sunlight casting long shadows through the maple tree Helen planted decades ago. I made coffee, sat in the chair by the back window, and for the first time in a long time, I had nowhere I had to be. But I wasn't idle. Evan had one more idea. "You should write it down," he said. "All of it. Every detail. What happened, what worked, what didn't. Think of the next Arthur Harland who might not have a nephew with a law degree." I'd never been much of a writer, but I understood records, documentation, the paper trail of a life, so I started. Each morning I sat at Helen's old roll-top desk. I wrote in longhand on legal pads. The story came out slower than I expected, but steadier. One detail led to another. Memos I remembered, conversations I'd buried, names, faces. I wasn't just writing what happened. I was recording **** how to survive it ***. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a man named Colin Richter, an operations supervisor from a parts supplier across the state. He'd heard about what happened at Norcarist through someone I'd never met. He'd just been given a severance offer 2 weeks before his pension clause kicked in. No explanation, no cause. "I know it's a long shot," he said on the phone, "but is there any way you could look at my documents, just to see if something feels off?" I said yes, because someone had done that for me. It didn't take long. Same tactics, same vague language, same artificial timeline. I looped Evan in. 2 days later, the company reversed the termination. Colin kept his job and his pension. The thing about corporate silence is, it relies on repetition, on no one noticing that what's happening to you just happened to someone else. But that repetition is fragile. Break it once, and suddenly, others start looking, asking, comparing notes. 3 more cases surfaced that month, different companies, different industries, but the same pattern, and they all came to me. I didn't ask for that role, but I didn't reject it either. I wasn't a whistleblower. I was something quieter. I was a reminder. Evan gave a talk at the State Bar Association that fall. He called it Legacy Clauses and the Invisible Line. He spoke about proximity protections, about patterns in termination timeline. He quoted my phrase, "Quiet doesn't mean weak." I didn't attend, but he sent me a recording, and that's when I realized this wasn't a personal story anymore. It was a template. On a rainy Thursday afternoon in October, Norm held a small internal ceremony. I didn't expect it to happen. I hadn't asked for it, but I went. It was short, simple, in a bright room near the HR wing. No podium, no speeches, just a wooden plaque. ***, the Harland Clause, instituted October 14, 2025 in honor of Arthur Harland, whose decades of service reminded us that fairness isn't optional. ***, they gave me a paperweight too, clear acrylic, engraved with my name and years of service. I didn't need it, but I took it anyway because sometimes symbols matter. After the ceremony I stayed a while, walked through the plant again, talked with some of the new hires, answered questions. One young technician asked me what to do when a supervisor ignores a safety report. "Document it," I said. "Then wait. You don't have to shout, but you do have to be ready when someone asks the right question." She nodded. And I knew she understood. That weekend I visited Ben Holloway at his workshop. He'd converted his garage into a small woodworking studio, smell of pine and varnish, thick in the air. "Didn't expect to live long enough to enjoy retirement," he said, running a hand over a half-carved bench. "Now I've got projects stacked to the rafters." He showed me a clock he was building, hand-cut gears, cherry wood casing, slow, beautiful craftsmanship. "I made this for you," he said, handing me a smaller piece, a pen, carved from reclaimed warehouse lumber. The wood was from Dock 3. I recognized the grain. By winter, Norcarist had rewritten their employee handbook. Page 42 now contained a new section. ***, 6b2 Pension Proximity Protections, the Harland Clause, ***, no employee within 30 calendar days of a retirement benefit milestone may be terminated or reassigned. Without documented cause and third-party HR oversight, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. Marcus called in December. Just wanted to say thanks again. He said I got promoted. Supervisor now. Good for you, I said, but be careful. It's easy to forget where you came from when they give you a badge. He laughed. Not me, Mr. Harland. I still keep your old coffee mug in my locker. Still chipped. Still chipped. One day I opened my front door and found a package on the porch. No return address. Inside, 17 letters typed, folded, hand-signed, each one from an employee I'd never met, each one wrongfully dismissed, each one now reinstated, compensated, or cleared, in part because they'd heard what happened to me. One of them had written, greater than I was ready to give up. But then I heard there was a guy who didn't. Thank you for not disappearing quietly. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't burn anything down. I didn't make a scene. I just didn't leave the room when they asked me to, and sometimes that's enough. Winter passed slow that year. The kind of cold that makes time feel heavy, like the world itself is catching its breath before turning again. Snow fell early and often, laying thick on the roads, the rooftops, and the old branches of the maple in my yard. I watched it all from the same chair each morning, coffee in hand, light streaming sideways through the frost-laced glass. Not because I was idle, but because, after everything, I could finally afford to be still. Jessica and her family came down from Chicago in February. She brought her youngest, my grandson, Oliver, 6 years old, wild with questions. He tugged at my sleeve while I was sorting through some old paperwork. Grandpa, he asked, were you ever a hero? I paused, hand resting on a yellowed envelope marked pension file -1996. No, I said. Just a man who stayed standing when they hoped I'd leave. He seemed puzzled, but later I saw him doodling a picture of me standing next to a building labeled Norcrest. I didn't correct him. Some stories need to live in symbols. The story had spread more than I expected. A regional business journal ran a piece, asterisk the clause that saved a generation. One man's stand against quiet terminations. Asterisk they interviewed. Evan quoted policy numbers, cited outcomes I declined to speak. I'd already said what mattered not to journalists, but in memos and meetings and silent refusals still, it meant something. Not fame but acknowledgement. Spring brought color back to the yard. Grass grew in patches. The birds returned. I started volunteering at a local job center that helped factory workers retrain or file appeals. I never introduced myself with the full story. Just told them I used to work in operations, knew my way around contracts, and was good at reading the fine print. One man came in with a termination offer that smelled all too familiar. Performance-based, they said. But no warnings, no reviews, just a box and a signature line. I asked him one question, do you want to leave, or do you want to stay? He looked up. I want to be respected, so we got to work. Every so often I'd get letters, some typed, some handwritten, a few scribbled on lined paper in barely legible print. From strangers, from workers across the state. They didn't ask for advice, they just said things like, greater than I thought I was the only one. They did the same to my father in '98. He never spoke up. I wish he had. I used to be afraid of retirement. Now I'm just counting days. The name Harland clause had started appearing in other contracts. Not because companies wanted to, but because people were asking. Sometimes change starts with policy. Other times, it starts with pattern recognition. I ran into Myra Colton again at a small HR roundtable in Dayton. She was speaking about ethical exit practices, citing recent changes in company culture, using phrases like proactive transparency and legacy protections. When she saw me, her voice faltered slightly. Afterward, she approached up, meant what I said. Arthur, what happened to you shouldn't have happened, and it won't again. Not under my watch. I nodded, not out of forgiveness, but out of shared understanding. People don't always choose to do the right thing first, but they can choose to do it next. Evan visited one weekend in late May, brought beer, sat on the back porch with me, shoes off, jacket draped on the railing. You know, you're kind of a folk legend now, he said, grinning. I'm a retired warehouse supervisor, I said. That's all. You're a case study in 3 HR law courses. I'll drink to that. We toasted. To persistence. To paperwork. To family. By summer, Norcrest had expanded the Harland clause company-wide, not just in retirement terms, but in all major compensation thresholds. The board mandated a 90-day protection window before bonuses, anniversaries, and pension events. Other companies quietly followed. It never made national headlines, but internally it mattered, because it changed behavior, because people noticed, because quiet damage was finally being answered with quiet resistance. One morning, I visited the plant again just once. The new general manager invited me to tour the floor. Young guy, sharp, respectful. He walked me through some of the upgrades, showed me the digital system they'd implemented, built partially from the handwritten process manuals I'd drafted years ago. They still use your color-coded system, he said, just digitized. Near Dock 3, someone had mounted a framed print of the original HR memo that introduced the Harland clause. It hung beside the fire extinguisher, out of the way, but visible. That was enough. The maple tree outside my kitchen, Window turned gold again by October. I sat with Oliver on the porch one evening. He was older now. Still curious, Grandpa, he asked. Why didn't you just take the deal? Because it wasn't about the money. I said it was about what they thought they could take quietly. He was quiet a moment, then asked, would you do it again? I didn't hesitate. Yes, every time. I never wanted revenge. I never raised my voice. I never asked for recognition. But I left behind something that would outlive me, a clause. Warning, a signal that someone once said no, and that might be the legacy that matters most. Not being loud, not being feared, but being the man who didn't disappear.